You
Josh,
all in there?
sounds good. Can you hear us?
Yeah.
Looks like we've got everyone in the room. Jen's online as well. So whenever you're ready, Josh, we are ready.
All right, I'm gonna try turning on my video and hopefully have good self-service to carry video. Seems like you're still hearing me okay?
Yes.
Cool. There's trains in the background, so you're gonna hear a little bit of trains in the background. If you don't mind, why don't we start with a roll call? I'm on the road, Josh Ewing, Mayor here. I see Jen Davila is also on the road. And then if the folks in the room maybe can call out your name just so we have it for the record.
Yeah, Britt Hornsby.
Spencer Wade. Gary Haas.
Aaron Nelson serving as town manager.
Leah Collins, Administrative Director. It is Tuesday, June 9th at 4 o'clock.
Good deal. We'll call to order our work session. Thanks everybody for being with us today. We did put an opportunity for public comment on the agenda. So if there's anyone in the room that wants to make a comment, hopefully folks can raise their hand. If you're online like I am, go ahead and put your name in the chat. And we'll take the online comments after any comments in the room. Are you seeing anybody over there that wants to make a comment, Aaron?
Nope.
No.
Give it just a second here in the chat, but I don't see anybody putting their name up. All right. We will move on to the big item on the agenda, which is talking about our budget. I had asked Britt to kind of facilitate a little bit of a discussion from people in the room that of what they were hearing from our friends and neighbors and businesses and so forth in town. So just to kind of put it that way, I'm going to let him do that in the room because it's a little bit easier to do that in person. But first, I wanted to ask Erin to give some updates. She's been working really hard as we're narrowing the deadline for this budget to kind of update what we are seeing in terms of revenue, what are the expenditures that we didn't incur this year that we budgeted for that we might need to roll over to next year, those sort of budget updates. So I'm going to take the liberty of asking her to give that update first, just because it probably will play into the, people's thinking about the budget a little bit. And then after we have the discussion of what folks are hearing, what they're thinking about the budget, then we can do a little bit of a straw poll and then think about next steps for preparing for next week's vote. Does that sound like a decent approach to everybody?
Yep. Yep.
Sounds good.
All right. Sounds good. I saw a head nod from Jen and sounds like you're all right there. So with that, I'll toss it over to Aaron. If you can give us some updates of some of those things that we talked about just maybe an hour and a half ago, that'll be really helpful for us. Thank you.
So thank you, Josh. So we did just receive the distribution data from the tax commission. So that would be the April data. So we're starting to see, some larger numbers. As we had previously talked about, the town usually budgets very conservatively in terms of expected revenues. And then on the flip side, planning, a robust expenditure just to make sure that we've got, never know how much things are going to cost. I'm not going to share my screen right now because we're in just like number land, but if you want me to, show where I'm getting some of this data and some of my thoughts, I'm happy to. But on a whole, what I am estimating, and again, estimates versus budget can be very different. So like the amended budget that you all passed, that's a good budget. It is a good budget and it is conservative. But what we will probably see is that our revenues are going to exceed that budget, which is great, and our expenditures are quite a bit less. So getting down just to the core of it, I am estimating that we have projected an additional 90,000, 80 to 90,000. That is either, so of that, 46 comes from revenues that are going to exceed the budget. Most of that is in like TRT, resort and sales tax. So compared to budget, I think we're gonna come in probably about $35,000 over our expected budget, which is great. Again, but that's unrealized funds. So the budget calls for $327,000 roughly in the top category. Actually today we've collected 284. We have 2 more months of distributions. So if things kind of keep on track, an extra about 35, but again, that is unrealized. Clearly businesses have been collecting taxes the last month and a half. So that's kind of my projection there. We're also coming in over on some of like our licenses and permitting. The building department has been quite busy recently. So like that, we're seeing an increase in revenues as well. Interest, we've had more money sitting in PTIF than originally expected because we were thinking that we were going to take that out for some large capital projects that have either been pushed back or moved or paid for in other ways. So our interest earned is going to be more than budgeted. So like those are all great things. So revenues looking very positive for the end of the fiscal year. For expenditures, the flip side, but still positive. So from an administrative, that whole big administrative category, I'm expecting that we're going to come in about $32,000 under our projected budget. So a lot of that is due to legal. We had some really good numbers for legal in case, you know, things went sideways. But quite a bit in savings, savings is the right word, and not expenditures there. We're also seeing not expenditures in you know, just I mean it just kind of adds up. The big one is legal enforcement. You had 5,000 allocated. There hasn't been much pulled out of there. Moving on into like emergency services and fire, I am expecting the fire department to utilize all 15,000 that was allocated for this year. Dawn and I have been chatting about other equipment that they're looking to purchase and like turn downs and stuff. But the about $5,000, $5,012 that was unspent from EMS would just move into next year, and that one is not even part of it. We're just saying that moves straight over. It's kind of a restricted fund. Michael's in the same boat. He's got some money that was not expended, so that'll roll over into next year, which bumps him up. We'll talk about that a little bit later. The capital projects that are not included in this rollover, that we're just going to take them, you know, move capital projects. Didn't happen this year, would happen next year. Would include this facility, the grant or the generator project, and USDA money coming for that. And then, yeah, so all of that, it comes out to, you know, around $40,000 in unspent budget, and then 46 in additional revenues. And that's on top of the 56,000 that we already had in the fund balance allocation. So I don't want to say you've got like $90,000 to play with, but that's 90,000 that you can expand projects, utilize it for other things that you are already thinking. And again, I just want to reiterate, this is not bad budgeting. This is really good budgeting, but we've had a lot of big projects that are kind of coming to a head at the end of the year that we were trying to make sure that, you know, if we needed to spend the money, we would. So I think this puts us in a really solid position. It doesn't necessarily change everything for the tentative budget, but there are some, you know, tentative budget changes that, you know, these projects would just kind of move over into the next fiscal year. Capital projects, we have roughly $600,000 in capital projects right now. We also have, oh, Michael, what was the number that I gave you? Michael has a good pot of money too that is continuing to earn money in PTIF. So his original request for like 230,000 for next year He actually has quite a bit more runway, and so he'll talk a little bit later, because we've got good runway, for him as well. I think your request now is like 252,000, which should be achievable with the money that we have set aside in PTIF. That's again continuing to earn money. We were also really lucky in that the San Juan Transportation Board reimbursed us so quickly. So the money that like left to pay our supplier or pay the vendors essentially just like got replaced within a matter of weeks. And so, that money just continues to earn quite a lot. So very high level, you don't want to see my spreadsheet right now. It's very ugly. But can I talk through, is there anything you want me to go back to or hit on, or clarify?
And part of the, we were like super conservative, not just conservative, but like extra conservative. Budget for the last council for this year,
Yeah.
because we were trying to understand what the tourism fallout was gonna be, because it seemed like it was hidden, and it is down, but not as bad as it was, right? So-
Yeah, oh, definitely. That does bring up a good point though, because, I had even looked at, in trying to find more money, do we project that next year's taxes, are maybe even, but I think it is far too early to say that like we're seeing any kind of trends. And, I don't want to feed into any fears or anything, but I would still be really cognizant as we finalize that number for next year. Is that even too optimistic? I have like $100 or $390,000 potentially coming in. We just don't know. It's all a guess. It's all a good guessing game. But just, something to be aware of. Like, yep, I think we're on pretty good track to hit this estimated $362,000 in that tax category this year. Don't know what that's gonna be next year.
And we don't know our last 2 months, correct?
Yeah, so we won't have the data for May and June until,
August?
yeah, we'll have our final numbers in August. Michael, actually, for the roads department, he doesn't get his final distribution until September from UDOT. So we have a lot of. Yeah, so we're calculating that he's gonna get X amount that will then, it's put in this year, but we'll use the fund, it's that fund balance roll over. It's a little complicated, but,
Okay.
Jen does something.
oh, sorry, I'm not even
Yeah,
looking at my
can we see-
screen.
Can we see the
Oh,
thing?
Jen,
Can you guys hear me?
were you on? Yeah,
Yeah.
I was just gonna question the unrealized yet, and wondering for TRT and the resort tax, if that was for May that you're calculating or June as well. My numbers, I'm just gonna throw out an example of my personal business. June of 2025, I was running about 75% occupancy. June of 2026 is dropped down into the 40s. So we are going to get a significant hit. We are already realizing the significant hit that we're going to get. So I don't think it's out of place to be even more conservative than we were last year.
We didn't have the gas prices weren't like this last year.
No,
So I
they
feel like
weren't.
that's a huge factor as well.
yeah, so that's a really good point, for May, I feel like, the general consensus in the business community from what I was hearing, like, yep, it was a pretty solid month. But if June totally nosedives, that potential revenue that I quoted of like, kind of looking at like $46,000, I think you could drop that down even further, to, 35 to 40. So, yeah, definitely possible.
Yeah, couple of things to add. One is I personally really think that there's a big lag in the drop in tourism that we're maybe just starting to see for Jen's comment. And that it's really wise for us to be conservative on our revenue projections in the next year budget, which I think that the estimates that Aaron put together are pretty conservative. Like I think I don't know that we need to be too much more conservative than that, but I think we certainly wouldn't want to bump them up just based off of coming in a little higher than our last year's conservative estimates. The other point is that this carryover money that Aaron is describing of our revenues being a little higher than projected and our expenses being a little lower, we are not proposing in this budget to move that money into capital projects, but instead to carry it in fund balance. And, my understanding of the previous council's policy was to not carry a fund balance, but instead to put money into capital projects. And so they built up the capital projects fund significantly to the order of something like $600,000. But that is not a reserve fund. Those are capital projects funds that you really, really, really have to think twice about moving them into operating budget, because what you've told the public is that they are being put aside for capital projects. And the league has really counseled against us using capital projects money for ongoing town expenses. We can use carryover fund balance for ongoing expenses in emergencies. And so what I would propose is that we don't add to capital projects for a while and instead build up some fund balance that can be a true rainy day fund that we can tap if the ceiling drops out from us on tourism and revenues are significantly lower than what we've projected in the budget. So just a couple of comments there.
Is there anything that needs to be done on our end to swap that over to?
No, I think it would just be like, for next week, because the idea would be you would all be voting on an interim or a budget for fiscal year 2027, is that we could put more into the fund balance at the top of the sheet, which is counted as revenue. Counted as revenue for next year. And again, like we were just talking about, like maybe it's not that full 142 that I quoted originally. Maybe it's a step back because we think June is going to be absolute, a lot more flat. But yeah, so that amount would go up, so you'd have more in revenues. Now I will say to Josh's point, having this fund balance does make it a lot easier to kind of roll with I don't want to say unexpected expenses during the year, but just you do have a little bit more room, I guess. The tentative budget that was proposed for the following year, so that's fiscal year 2028, only had like $4,000. Now we've historically been running money going into capital projects anywhere from $180,000 annually. So to only have $4,000 and like that, I was scraping the bottom of the barrel to be like, okay, we can save like a little money here and a little bit of money here, just to have like that little amount that could roll over into the next year. If you were to do that, full trickle down of like, okay, we've got a little bit more in revenue from this year, moving down, you guys can, maybe be, okay, are there any other projects that you want to work on? Of course, elephant in the room, you're going to talk about emergency services and that support and everything. So I'm not saying like, hey, go spend this additional $90,000 and like, it's all great, but you do have more room to add but still think about, at the end of the day, how much do you want to then, is there anything you want to put to capital projects? Do we want to take some money out of capital projects and use this fund balance to achieve some of your goals this coming year without completely depleting capital projects fund kind of thing? So you have a little bit more room than, and again, for the public, I just really want to stress, like, situations change. These are always changing things. Like there's a lot of information that we can collect in a month. But it also doesn't negate, again, like elephant in the room, doesn't negate the truth and taxation process. Bringing that up, talking about, why a municipality would potentially go through that, especially if, we haven't made an adjustment in 8 years, but that's for you all to talk about and decide, and I will turn it back over after that.
So one other thing to note on the fund balance and basically rollover is that we really need to think about that as one-time money. That is not like ongoing money that we could count on going forward. So if we were going to expend it and not carry it over to the following fiscal year, we would want to be careful to expend it on one-time expenses as opposed to ongoing expenses, ongoing operations expenses. Kind of the budget 101 for Utah League of Cities and Towns, and kind of the first deadly sin of municipal accounting is to use one-time money on ongoing expenses. So I would say it's like a great buffer for us to have, emergency buffer, and we want to be careful about how we think about expending those funds. And probably in the current environment, we want to think about just building up some emergency reserve. Maybe if there's no other questions on that, maybe Britt, I don't know if you want to facilitate the part of the discussion where we're talking about what we've been hearing and what people are thinking about budget.
Yeah, totally. And since Jen's online too, y'all feel free to jump in whenever you want.
I have a quick question, just some clarification on what you were saying, Josh. So if I'm understanding you right, you're saying that the money that we collect for that, if we decide to put some of that or all of that money into a fund balance, we would want to use that on one time. Like,
Essentially, the money saved this year
mhm,
shouldn't be expected every year.
Right.
So if we have overhead costs that we know are ongoing, we shouldn't say, oh, we're gonna have $80,000 to have this ongoing project or have this ongoing, I'll say it, position. It's not a guarantee.
right.
It is a good job budgeting, good job, guys. But it's
More of an emergency of like, oh, we had this unexpected thing happen. We do have this fund that we don't have to pull from other things. We can just pull from this and
absolutely.
yeah, okay,
Yeah.
got it. Thank you.
Okay.
Well, one more question with that, just, with Aaron, I guess this question would be for you, just with all of the work you've done with the budget, is there, like, we're just like working with the town for all this time, like, do you have an idea of what some of the, like any ideas of in your mind, what that money might go towards? Like things that we historically have been like, oh, shoot, this came up, like,
Gotcha.
if that makes sense. Sorry,
Alright.
not
Well,
formulated very
No, that's a good question. And yeah, just, for consideration, right? Yeah, my job for consideration. And this is one that we've been talking about Michael and I've been talking about for, I don't know, couple weeks. It's bounced around in my head for a while, but like, a town vehicle. So Michael's not using his personal car to go out and do inventory and maintenance, or for someone to take up to the municipal meetings and stuff like that, or county meetings and stuff. There's actually a surplus website. You can pick stuff up for pretty cheap. Now, of course, you are going to have ongoing maintenance with that vehicle. But that would be one that like even could be coupled with like funding from CERTA. They've talked about that. So like we have a little bit of a match, and we could get a vehicle or something like that. In terms of like maintenance or things that like we just haven't gotten to, I would say Malia's been working very hard to like make sure that the community center is upkept. And, I think every year we're chipping away at some of those projects that like, yeah, it's gotta be done. Definitely kind of puts me on the spot a little bit, but Malia, is there anything else like on we had kind of talked about your maintenance budget and things that, a lot of labor that, that maintenance position we were excited for, but I don't know if there were any like real big one-offs that would be.
That didn't budget this year.
Yeah.
There's always dreams.
Yeah.
Trying to figure out a better parking situation for the community center here. Whether that's on the outside of the fence or redoing the parking lot here and just kind of continuing to upgrade facilities. And then also just always keep in mind the brick. We don't know what, once that does open up, what we're gonna actually end up wanting to put over there. I mean, playground, it looks like we can easily get grants for those, but that solar project, we don't really have a whole lot of funds set aside for that solar project here or there.
It's a good call. Yeah, big ticket items. Yeah. I was like, what can fit in like 50 to 90,000? But yeah, I mean, you've got a lot of projects that are multi-$100,000, $100,000. So, yeah, I think
Spencer, one thing, what I would say is, I guess I would think about less on spending it. I mean, there could be emergencies, like we get sued and we have way bigger legal expenses, or, some very unexpected thing, there's a tornado that comes down through town, and, those sort of things. And then I think the more likely scenario for us to think about is if revenues are significantly lower than projected, you could temporarily cover, some projects that were one-time projects in the budget. But again, wouldn't want to do that for ongoing. Aaron, real quick, I forgot. I think when we were talking earlier, we also said that in your update you would talk about the cemetery, because we didn't have much money in the cemetery budget, and there's since been some discussion that I wasn't involved in about potentially needing additional cemetery money next year.
absolutely. Thank you. So I got an email, or I asked Carolyn to send me a kind of a recap email. So I'm going to try to, okay. So, and again, like the cemetery board's been doing great, but it's kind of like they're realizing stuff. Oh, we could do this and we could do this. And I think that while they have also started this, there are still things that they would like to do beyond this. So one of the items that they've identified is placing like a single lane gravel road that would make the quote new section more accessible for like our maintenance vehicles and like processions and things like that. So a 2-lane road, like $15,000. So quite a lot. Could be something that you could chip into or tell them, hey, go write a grant and we'll do some matching. And then they've already kind of started thinking about, some beautification projects. These are harder to get grants from the state on because it's not like a need, it's a want. But they've talked about some signage and benches and the delineation of the plots. That's a big issue because like all over there.
Yeah.
And it looks like we've got that at about 5,000. So road anywhere between like 8 and 15, maybe. Thank you, Michael, for helping with that. And then some beautification, phase 2. I'm thinking that might even, have even more in like phase 3, but 5,000. And that again, up to you guys, how you space that out. I think it would be helpful. Josh and I were kind of talking to, maybe it's helpful for you all to provide a budget and say, here's how much you have this year. How do you want to, then the recommendation comes back, we're gonna buy benches and this and that, and then next year we'll plan on plans.
So last question that I have with this money, so we can, if we decide to put all of that into a fund, that's all we would need to do for the budget for this fiscal year.
Yeah, so
And then next fiscal year could be like, oh, cemetery needs this, we could do a match, or, we could kind of fill in if we need to, or we can just hold on to it. And
yeah, so there's nothing preventing you from moving the money. It's just saying, okay, it's gone into the fund balance, looks like a revenue for fiscal year 2027. There's nothing that prevents you from using it or not using it. It can flow then through into a fund balance for the next year. That's totally fine. Yeah, you don't have to earmark it for anything. If you were to choose to want to put it like into capital projects, then of course that is separate. That's gonna be its own animal. But yeah, there's nothing that says like you must spend all of it or you must have this amount remaining at the end of the year. It's just like you can put it there, it can flow through.
awesome. I mean, to me, it sounds like a great idea to have that buffer with the uncertainty of.
Yeah, the $4,000 in buffer was making me feel a little nervous when I presented that. And again, like, I don't think that there's any amount that's like the perfect number. Maybe someone with additional municipal management would disagree. But I also think that, when you look at the strategic plan and like what's called for in there, and you think about your priorities, Josh did a great job leading you all through like your big 5 priorities. For this calendar year, which of course are impacted by this fiscal year, that's really where you should derive the prioritization. But yeah, I think that's a good thing to lean on too, is, where were we supposed to be with the strategic plan? And of course, priorities do change. but.
Aaron, would something like using the fund balance to fund like the dark sky portion, which isn't necessarily set in stone, but we have increased significantly for the upcoming budget, would something like that be okay to do, to swap out the $10,000 increase for dark sky and use fund balance money for that? Because it's not necessarily a dedicated amount every year. It was just something that we had available, is kind of how I interpreted it.
Yeah, so I would leave that just like it is general fund. We're not saying that anything here is like an allocate. Now, we do have a couple like restricted funds with roads, any of the grant monies or anything, but no, I would say that like this money would be unrestricted unless you all were to determine it otherwise. When you start assigning restrictions, so for example, we look at the fundraising money, we're very tight on like fundraising for this, it goes to that purpose. So if you were to say, you know, we are solely using this, I wouldn't think of it that way. I would say, okay, it's contributing to the overall big general fund, as opposed to saying it's for the specific purpose. But yes, you can definitely say, hey, that could help prop up that particular initiative, knowing that you've got a bit more buffer.
I guess where I was going with that is that if we were looking at creating a position or something like that, that's going to be something that we kind of need to have the revenue guaranteed to pay. Whereas the dark sky budget isn't necessarily that way. I mean, it's great. We had extra money. We could pump that up a little bit, but next year, you know, it doesn't mean that we're going to have that same amount of money. Whereas if it's a position and we want to keep that position, that's something that we kind of have to have accounted for year after year.
Definitely.
Yeah, Jen, I think to your point, I think what you're saying, if I'm hearing it right, and this is the way I'm thinking about it too, is that if for example, we said we are not going to do a tax increase, right? And therefore we have $50,000 less of revenue in the budget than we had in the budget before, right? Then you could use some of that fund balance to pay for things, but you wouldn't, like you said, you wouldn't want to use the fund balance part to pay for an ongoing thing like a position,
Right.
or maintenance. You could use that fund balance for something more like a one-time thing, a one-time contribution to Bob, one-time contribution to Dark Skies, that sort of thing, right? So you could see it that way, as like you could see that fund balance covering portions of the budget like that, right? But if you were going to go with a position, you would want to have that come out of like expected revenues. Like, you know, you would want to cover that first and then make sure that you that was covered by expected revenues, and then one-time things were maybe paid for with fund balance.
Right. So if we're going into the feedback that we've gotten to the community about this, I have gotten, as I'm sure we all have, an exhausting amount of feedback from the community over this subject. And that is the one thing that I keep hearing over and over and over again is, well, couldn't you look at something else and cut it in order to start a position like this? And maybe it's not the full $40,000 position. Maybe it's an hourly position to start with, just kind of work out the kinks and get the bugs out and things like that. That has been the predominant question that I've been asked from the community.
Well, that's a good segue to go into what was number one, review and discuss public comments regarding fiscal year 2027, tentative budget and proposed property tax increase from the budget public hearing, your town budget at work, open house event, and other comments received. Yeah, Jen, I heard, we heard that a lot in private comments. We saw that in letters and heard it, I think repeatedly at the public comment. Do you fellows have anything to add, either her point or
No,
other things you heard? I mean, this is gonna be a big, big conversation, so
Yeah.
let's just get
No,
it.
she pretty well. That sums up a lot of the comments I've gotten from people, that, you know, the biggest thing is we probably ought to table it, come up with a strategic plan for it to implement it and work into it like the hourly thing, like Jen said. You know, if they put in X hours, they turn in a timesheet, we pay them, you know, but to create $40,000 a year job for one person, 95% of the people that I spoke with or the letters I read are against that.
I talked to a lot of people about this and I had a different percentage. I would say at least 60% of the people that I talked to were for this. And one of the comments that I heard was that it should be a full-time position and paid higher than the recommended amount, which made sense to me of like, and maybe not necessarily right now, but like once it's developed and we have a plan for it. And it wasn't, you know, we didn't kind of go through all the details, but from business owners and from a fair amount of people, and not necessarily like, you know, saying that we have to go this route, but I talked to quite a few people that were for the tax increase, supported it, and supported this position in some form, whether it was the proposed part-time or a full-time. I didn't get to talk to everybody that I wanted to. I plan on talking to some more people this week. But that's just some of the comments that I heard. I also heard the same thing of a lot of people against it, either saying like going with an hourly position or just not having it at all. But kind of a mixed bag.
Yeah, I felt like I was constantly having maybe two separate conversations with people at the same time, like where they would come up and they would like almost like we almost couldn't talk about the property tax because they would be so involved in on what this position was going to be and like what's the job description on the position, what's it going to, you know what I mean, what's the plan on it, to where like even if they supported the property tax, they got completely boondoggled on that on that issue, and I don't blame them. I mean, it's not
Right.
It's not clear what it is like to me. So like but I did get a fair amount of people for it. What was wild to me and Spencer were talking about this. I don't know if maybe Aaron saw it, but like the kind of generational divide on this one was probably the most like clear divide I've seen so far in a town, kind of like a town subject. Like a lot of folks,
That was my experience.
a lot of folks like around our age or so, Bluff young, right? You know, 55 and less or whatever. A lot of them for property tax increase, which I was, like we talked about, a little bit shocked at because our generations haven't exactly had a great return on taxes, the stuff we put in. So, but it was a lot of being like, yeah, I mean, it seems like we need to do something. I mean, to do something with fire. I mean, and they want, and there is this difference in generational of wanting to pay people for their service rather than expecting a volunteer to do it. And so that part that came in during the public comment where it became this big thing about volunteerism was a little bit of a shock to me. Given that we had just heard that don't only have 4 people on the fire department. We know we have a lot of people that volunteer. We also know we have a lot of people that over volunteer, and that a lot of people do too much. So that was a little bit shocking to me, or unexpected, not shocking, to see the conversation kind of go that way.
Yeah.
But and I do want to like make sure people understand that there is a difference between a volunteer and an employee, and that and the main difference is expectations. You can have expectations on an employee. You can expect them to do stuff. You can hold them more accountable than they're a volunteer. So you're only, there's only so far you're going to hold them accountable to anything or expect of them things. So I get that, and I appreciate the comments on it, but the volunteerism was a little bit of a sideways one for me. Josh, Jen, anything you want to throw in while we're round robin?
Well, the generational thing does and does not kind of surprise me. Actually, it doesn't surprise me. I think that a lot of our older people who are living in town are kind of living on a more, a more, I don't want to say tight income, but a more they're not going to go out and get a second job to make more money. What's the word that I'm a fixed income. Yes, thank you. My brain's part. But anyway, so when you have a fixed income and you're kind of budgeting that type of thing, I think that's at least what a lot of people that I heard from were saying. Also, I've had a lot of business owners come talk to me and say, we're not going to have a good year. We're already not having a good year, and I just can't take the hit on the taxes this year. That's, I think that if we could put it off, develop a schedule or develop a job description, develop a role, and then approach it again in another year, especially since the county's pushing hard for the sales tax increase too. That was kind of the sentiment that I was getting from most of the people who approached me about that, is we're already going to have a county sales tax increase. I can't swing it this year is kind of, at least from the business owners that approached me, sentiment.
Yeah, it seemed like that was a common refrain, was people are already being squeezed by the county, already being squeezed by gas prices, inflation, we
General
heard that over
inflation.
and over again. Which, I just find frustrating situation that, what I mean, that others have raised taxes, and because inflation to me is a tax, like others have raised taxes to a point where we can't raise taxes like that. That's preventing us from moving forward, or might prevent us from moving forward or having it more receptive.
Because that is one of the hard things is, as a municipality, us raising taxes, that's money that directly goes to us. That's our money that we get to use to benefit our town. But being squeezed by all these other taxes that we may or may not see any benefit from puts that pressure on us to where it makes it harder to want to do that.
Josh, do you have anything you wanna jump in with, bud?
Sure, happy to add a few thoughts. One is, I spent the time reading all the comments we've received, and I really sought out a lot of folks' advice, and I'm really appreciative of the town for engaging in the discussion, because I think it's really critical for us to hear from people. And I will say, I think it's also our job as council members to look at the facts and the arguments that people are bringing together. And not, it's like, this isn't a vote. This is we're taking comment on an issue and trying to make the best decision that we can. And, I really, what struck me the most about some of the comments is just people being honest that they didn't feel like they could afford an increase at this time. And it's a really tough time, which I really take personally, because I don't want to make, life harder for any of our fellow residents. And, I think we get put in a really tough, position as decision makers, where we're basically saying we're gambling that if we don't put them in a tough position now, it won't be worse later, that we won't be making the problem worse later. And that's a really hard position for us to be in as decision makers. I will say that in all the comments I heard, I didn't hear one rational argument that explained how, if we don't do something, the problem is going to get better. That it is a responsible thing for us, that it'll just this problem is going to fix itself. I don't think that's going to happen. And I think it's really clear that our town, with all the new responsibilities from emergency management coming down from the state, and with the wildland urban interface requirements coming down from the state, and the capacity challenges on the fire department, that if we don't invest in capacity, the things are going to get better on their own. And I'm not convinced by people who say, oh, I'll volunteer a little bit here and there. My wife, Kirsten, her full-time job is managing volunteers. And it takes, capacity to manage volunteers and to recruit volunteers and to get volunteers. And so, in my mind, it's not an option for us to kick this can down the road because it's only going to get the problem worse. And if our fire department, for example, lost ISO rating points, our businesses would be paying a heck of a lot more money in insurance down the road than they would be paying in a property tax now. With that said, I can totally understand if like other council members are like, now is not the time. But I think if now is not the time to raise taxes, then we need to cut the budget other places in order to afford to add this capacity in the system myself. Now, me personally, I didn't volunteer, like sign up for this job to like, kick cans down the road. Like I want to solve problems. And I don't think it's reasonable or responsible for us to have only 5% of our town budget coming from property tax. We're asking, when we're that reliant on the tourism revenues, we're just asking for a problem down the road. I don't think it's crazy for our town residents to pay a similar tax rate, for example, like Blanding does, which pays twice as much in property tax rate than we pay. So I personally am willing to like, make a hard vote and like vote for a tax increase because I don't think like things are just going to get better. There's never going to be a good time. And I think it's fiscally irresponsible for us to be so reliant on tourism money personally. With that said, like I want, I know we all want's best for the town. And if folks are just not, not in an appetite to vote for the tax increase, we need to, determine that tonight and then figure out what we're going to do with the budget. But what I wouldn't do is just fund everything in the budget except for capacity for emergency services. I'd do the opposite. I would start cutting the things like dark skies. I'd start cutting things like increased promotion for business owners of Bluff. I would go down the list of some of those other things like the trail. We had 5,000 in trails. We had $10,000 for a wayfinding promotion project in the budget. And I would start cutting out those things before I would cut out capacity for the fire department. I hear that people want the perfect like strategic plan, and the reality is you don't get one of those if you don't have capacity to work on it and to capacity to meet your state legal requirements. So I would invest in getting started, getting additional capacity in these really important areas, and then cutting other things if we don't have the appetite to move forward with property taxes. And so that's where I would be curious just to hear, like from a straw poll perspective, where are people on a property tax increase? If folks are in a no position on that, we basically have a week to remake the budget to be 50,000 less dollars in revenue, because we're required by law to have a budget for fiscal year 27 starting July 1st. So we have to pass a budget. And if it's going to be a budget that includes 50,000 less, then we need to make those adjustments.
So from, I guess, the room up and get cracking. So for me, I mean, it's a wild feeling, dude. Like I am for property tax increase. Like I'm actually for property tax increase. I wish I could take it away from being denoted to just fire. Like I would be for it, even if it was just going towards general funds. I don't know if you can share it or if it's appropriate, but seeing some of the numbers Aaron's pulled up on what the rates are, people are paying with smaller budgets than ours, like the tax
Throughout the state.
Throughout the state. The taxes are low here. They're so low that it's not low. I feel like they're being inappropriately taxed. So like even if this vote was to go to not bring property taxes right now, I would still be for the conversation not stopping at all and just continuing like down the path of like we need to raise property taxes, because to like Jen's point months and months ago, like I mean, we're going to do this incrementally, or are we going to do this big as a big major hit 20 years down the road, or do it incrementally now? So I mean, I'm for raising property taxes. I've gotten a little boondoggled in with the position though, to be honest, and it's partly because I'm not quite certain everything it would do. I mean, I think that like even if we take a step back and we were to make it, if maybe even making that strategic, like you're saying, maybe even making the strategic plan is part of the position or more of a larger part of it, I would feel better about it. But I do want to point out, so everybody knows, I mean, this is like page 1 basically of the strategic plan. Like this is like the very first thing you read in the strategic plan, Josh. So I appreciate you going after the fire position because this is clearly what town wanted. Objective number one, provide reliable and responsive fire and emergency services. And the short-term actions on that, the very first two things are create a paid emergency service manager position to handle administrative duties and required paperwork to alleviate bandwidth constraints on volunteers. And then the next sentence is create a paid technician position to perform routine preventative maintenance on emergency vehicles and equipment. So this is something that people have wanted for a while. And it's in our strategic plan.
On a comment that I'd heard from multiple people was, I mean, just the amazing benefit to town that we've seen from our paid employees, most of which I'm in the room, I mean, brought in a ton of money to the town. We've seen a huge benefit to it. I mean, I feel like it's been extremely beneficial. So, I mean, it'd be huge. It'd be a huge lift for our town.
And I've heard the same thing, but I also heard that they worked into it slowly. That they got paid an hourly rate at first and moved in more and more, and then more responsibilities and more, and then became full-time, and now we're looking at benefits for them and retirement and all that. And that's what they're saying is, let's just move into this slowly. You know, if we've got an extra 90,000 from this year, we've got money there to fund something like this slowly in. Once we throw out a tax increase, we can't go back. They can't, we won't be able to go back on it and say, okay, now we're gonna cut the taxes. We've already increased it.
Could.
And,
You could, I think it rarely goes that direction. But
okay, that should be rarely.
You could, it very
I
rarely.
did talk to one business that said they're gonna take a $5,000 a year hit. And then made a comment and said, hey, where do I sign up to take the 5,000 hit? And they said, if we wanted to throw away revenue, if we had extra revenue to waste, it'd be better served creating a town marketing position so all our hotels aren't empty like they are now.
I mean, I would also argue that part of my problem with all this conversation is that we're doing two things at the same time. We're going hey, bring more people here. Hey, we're not doing anything to address the emergency needs, which those those tourists are one of the ones taxing us on, you know what I'm saying? Are gonna be people who might need it more so than us. So that's where I feel a little bit weird about even doing that. It's like bringing more people out here. I wouldn't.
Yeah.
Well,
Kathy Carson brought up an interesting point, because we keep saying emergency service program coordinator. And she says that EMS and fire are separate, because EMS is being covered by the county completely. They're getting paid by the county, they're getting serviced by the county. The 1% increase in sales tax will go to EMS, which will go to them. So are we talking about two separate issues, fire and EMS, and throwing it under one umbrella of emergency services? Or do we need to just make them clarify
the language.
that we're just talking about fire?
We're actually talking about more than two. I don't know what you're going to call, if you read in your packet our discussion later on, but what are you going to call the town's legal requirements for yearly emergency planning and emergency alert systems? And it's fire, it's EMS, it's a lot of emergency things put together. Our wildland urban interface, that's more fire. But historically, the town has helped our current EMTs with their training. It's not as if the town hasn't supported that. In fact, we supported significantly the most recent upgrade in training for one of our EMTs. And so, my guess would be that this would weigh heavily on the fire side, but there's also significant other emergency responsibilities that the town has that aren't fire and they aren't EMS. They are emergency planning and responsibilities, which we'll talk about a little bit more later in the agenda, because we got to make a decision on that too. And you probably read the letter from Tammy Gallegos on that. But we have these increasing emergency responsibilities from the state. some of which are fire and some of them are kind of other emergency planning. And we need bandwidth to cover kind of help with all of that.
Jen, what are you thinking?
Well, Mark Powell brought up a good point to me. I don't really think that we in Bluff are paying a whole lot less in property taxes than anyone else in the county. In fact, I would say it's probably a little bit the opposite of that. So I'm wondering why it is that Blanding, Monticello, things like that seem to get more a bigger slice of the pie from the sales tax revenue. So I wonder if that's something that we can go to the county about and say, hey, we need more of our property tax money. I don't know. I don't understand the process of all of that, but I do question if that's an avenue that we could look at. I also, I too think that this could be a valuable position. I'm also still not clear about which truth and taxation. I asked this before and I'm still not clear on on the answer. If we go for truth and taxation, can we do maybe a smaller tax increase? Are we specifically tied to this position with any, if we say state, we're raising the property taxes X amount, $50,000 for this purpose, are we tied to that? And what if we don't in the first year come up with a $50,000 position? I definitely think it's a valuable position. I definitely think that we could look at the budget and rearrange things to make start building the position. And then maybe in a year or two, we look at, okay, here's the position we have. We need more money to fund this. Let's, look at us, just try to do it in a more incremental way.
Jen, to your question about sales tax, I've been on a steep learning curve of learning all the
not
tax
sales tax, property tax.
Okay, yeah, you said sales tax.
I meant property tax. Sorry.
Yeah, property tax is just like it's a straight up thing. You can look online, you see exactly how much they're paying. Like our residents, all combined, pay $33,000 a year in property tax, and the property tax rate is like 125% lower than the property tax rate in Blanding. So that means if you own a $500,000 home in Blanding and you own a $500,000 home in Bluff, you're paying twice as much property tax to the town of Blanding as you are paying to the town of Bluff. Now, your overall tax bill might not be that much different because most of your taxes you're paying aren't going to the municipalities. They're going to the county, they're going to the school district. Most of it goes to the school district.
Right.
But in terms of how much money goes to the town, those people are paying twice as much to the town as we are. It's just like that is the math. And it's, on a per value basis. So if you own a $10 million business in Blanding, you pay twice as much to the town of Blanding as a $10 million business in Bluff pays to the town. And so it's not like the county is playing with this. This is just how the system works. Now, the county services, like sheriffs, for example, those are paid for by everybody, right?
Yep.
And so like the budget for the county is the county. And if you want additional enforcement, say for Blanding, wants cops, then they pay for extra, out of the Blanding budget.
Mm-hmm.
But the county budget is supposed to go to benefit the whole county. And, to ask for it back, like they're not going to give us money back. They might be, give us a better level of service if we advocate for it or something. But like, it's not like counties don't give property tax money back to municipalities,
I understand what you're saying. I think that's another point of confusion is that when we say, I don't think that we've clarified very well that it is the Bluff portion of the property tax that's going to increase as much. I don't think people really understand that. I think that they look at it and they see that, people throw around the number of 150% tax increase. I think they look at their whole entire tax bill and say, oh my God, they're going to increase my property taxes $150,000. Not that they're going to increase the Bluff portion of my property taxes 150%. I think that there's some miscommunication on that part. And yeah, I just think we need to clarify and work on it some more before we go for it.
I
I
think
think-
you're
Josh-
right, Jen, and to agree, you're right. Some people are figuring it out. I will, give credit where credit's due to a number of businesses that reached out and they really worked to understand this, right? And they got a number. I'll give credit to Sweetwater Market, for example. She was like, hey, she looked up what her value was. She, asked us for the number. She did the calculation, right? It wasn't on her whole bill. She got her numbers right. We checked
Right.
them. And, so I think some people are understanding it's still a significant increase. It's not insignificant.
Right.
It would be ridiculous if their entire bill was going up 150%. That would be like, yeah, get out your pitchforks. You know what I mean? I get it.
I think that's the sentiment that a lot of people are still kind of assuming, though.
Yeah, and I just don't know.
I don't know how to make it any more
clear.
clear. I agree with you, Josh. It's just I agree, but that's kind of the sentiment that I think a lot of people are still going on.
Josh, can you talk a little bit about or Aaron, a little bit about these House bills that'll be coming down that'll affect the way we can raise property taxes? Is there and what we'll be looking at if we do kick the can on property tax and just go to budget cut?
I default to Mayor Ewing.
If that
Yeah.
makes sense.
Yeah, so I'll caveat is like just because laws were introduced this year at the legislature doesn't mean they're going to pass next year, right? But I think what we clearly can see is there is a very strong national and Utah anti-property tax bent. And the directionality that Utah League of Cities and Towns is effectively fighting against so far, but there were some bills that got close that would dramatically reduce our ability as a town to raise any significant portion of revenue from property tax. So the bill that got the closest this year, for example, would have said that municipalities can only increase property taxes by 5% a year, right? So basically, we would just never be able to raise any significant amount because even if we did 5% a year, that'd barely be keeping up with inflation. We would never, have any significant portion of our revenue from the town come from property taxes. There were a number of much more technical bills that were proposed that would also limit towns' ability to raise property taxes, and those were also defeated. The one that did pass is the one that kind of put us in a tricky situation where it said you have to say in your first budget meeting in May, if you're considering a property tax increase, you have to say what that property tax is going to go to. So to your question, Jen, no, we have to say what the property tax is going to go to. And you have to put it on the impact statement and you have to put it out to everybody. That's what the law told us that we have to do. I don't know the answer to your question of if we decided to go for a smaller property tax increase. I'm pretty sure we could do that. And we couldn't go for a bigger one. And I don't think we could use it for something other than what we said we were going to use it for. But I do think we likely could go for a smaller property tax increase. We would need to confirm that with the league and so forth. But I think that the point is you need to be truthful with what, the maximum property tax increase would be. But that was the law that passed this year on property taxes and, wasn't that onerous compared to some of the other ones that were potentially proposed. And if they passed, would basically just take property tax off the table for us.
So there is a time crunch in a sense then, and they don't the motivation seems to be there to push something like that or similar. So, okay. Any more comments?
One other thing that's been brought up to me a few times is, are we actually, we've talked about maybe using this for doing maintenance. Are we actually able to do maintenance on county-owned vehicles? I mean, is that something that we can even do, or is that the county then assumes that we're trying to overstep our not ownership of said vehicles, things like that? Is it something that we can do and not jeopardize our county partnership?
Yeah, it's a good question, Jen, and Chief Diego and I have talked about this quite a bit. I would be very leery on having a town position doing maintenance on a county vehicle or a county asset. Doing maintenance on a town asset would be different, and now we do have some assets that the town has paid for. But I would be leery on that. There's much more on the administrative side, like actually doing inventory of those things, doing paperwork, that replaces what the chief would do. Those sort of more administrative items, I don't think creates any liability for us in a way that maybe doing maintenance on a vehicle. What if our town employee messes something up with the truck or what have you? There could be those sort of things. And that's part of why, we've been working on a draft, a draft job description for this position. I've been hesitant to put it out there publicly because I think it needs some thought and work and working with the county and talking with the county and those sort of things on that position. But I would say that the maintenance piece, I think, would be a more problematic thing than, for example, doing wildland urban interface inventories and seeing which homes in town don't have defensible space that we need to work with those, and organizing volunteers to help those homeowners. Things like that are clearly in the town's responsibility under Utah law now. That's much safer to help with administrative items like that than to do direct maintenance on a county vehicle or facility.
Would we be able to raise taxes and have the position go to hourly, or does it have to be this?
There's nothing saying it, like that. That's part of the whole thing, is like, there was nothing ever proposed here saying how we have to spend this 40,000 other than it needs to be on a position. The position could be hourly. The position could be, you could come up with whatever structure you want for the position. The point of proposing it is we need to have some budget to pay someone to help with this capacity. And it could be hourly, it could be, on a retainer type monthly basis. It could start off at a lower rate and go up, right? So the structure of the position is not dictated. The idea is that we would be putting aside $40,000 for supporting this kind of position and the capacity. And as you know, like, it's not just $40,000 in salary to the person. You also have to pay workers' comp. You have to pay, Social Security, the employer's part of Social Security. So that 40,000 is like the loaded cost of that part-time employee. And how you decide to pay it, is kind of a future, discussion with that the town council can have.
I wonder if it'd be more palatable to still go forward with the tax, but maybe decrease the amount from 125%. That's where we're at.
151.
150, yeah, 151% maybe to 100. And then pull money from other areas to fund the position. That would definitely be something that, because that seems to be one of the biggest. There's a lot of concerns from town, but
Yeah.
but I wonder if that would make it more palatable.
I did speak to Jared Teague, who's the legal director for the ULCT. And he was telling me that we're kind of getting the cart a little before the horse on this, to use my own language. But what we needed to do was to back up a few steps and get an interlocal agreement in place with San Juan County that, hey, this is what they provide, this is what we're bringing to the table, so that it's down, so that they understand and we understand exactly what we're offering by doing this. And I think that's where we, the kicking the can down the road, it'll eventually come up. But it might be cleaner, more transparent if we get something with the county in place prior to setting up a property tax increase for that item, and we don't really know. I really hesitate with, the job descriptions coming.
Yeah.
And I think it was the acting fire chief that said it'll come out after the budget's made, and that really caused me and others some stresses. Why can't we know now what's going on, what it's gonna be doing? Why the wait, why the lack of transparency? That's one word they use. They use vision, clarity, or something.
Yeah.
But and maybe we are jumping ahead just a little too quick.
I mean, I guess if you're straw polling around for what people are comfortable with, Josh, I mean, I think what I'm comfortable with is I don't want the tax increase conversation to go away. I would like to continue to talk about it. I would like to, and then do hourly on these positions and create it as, I guess we would talk about, what the position would look like. And then continue to work on this throughout the year with this hitting next year, like with, and a year's worth of runway of conversations about it to have worked everything out. That's kind of where I'm at now. That's where I'm at now.
Yeah, Britt, thanks. Just real quick to Gary's point, I think he makes a really good point here, and I agree with Jared that it's really sad that we don't have a cooperative agreement with the county. Like, when I came in as mayor and I asked Aaron for our cooperative agreements that are all expired, it was like like this. I was like, this is why this is the number one priority for me. And I reached out to the now departed county commissioner, I think no fewer than 5 times, requesting meetings to start talking about this stuff. And so we do need to do that. And it's not just about fire. I think it should also be about the sheriff's department and a number of other things. But the fire, I think, is important. With that said, I continue to say, like, it is clear that our town needs capacity to work on this stuff. Like, no interlocal agreement is going to solve a lot of the lack of resources we have for administration, for doing wildland urban interface, things, to doing this emergency planning that the state's requiring us to do. If the county was going to do that for us, they would have done it for us. Like, that is not going to happen. Now, we can negotiate, I think, a good position with them. But in my mind, it's like what you need to solve these problems is more brain power and more people working on it. And we know this is probably like a, 2 or 3 FTE kind of problem, and throwing a half a FTE on it to help us move it forward is like, it's just smart for us to start working on it. And if we, especially now that there's not an administrator at the county, if we wait till we have an interlocal agreement with the county, we could be waiting a really long time before we do anything. So, I think it's like, yes, we need to be working on that stuff. And no, I don't understand why we don't have that. When I started as mayor, that all of our interlocal agreements with the county had expired. I don't have explanations for that. I just know, like, we need to work on it. And we need help, to free up time for the chief, for example, to work more on that stuff.
What if we were to form some type of committee, like the cemetery group, to work on it more? So I'm sure people would volunteer to come in, volunteer again. But there's a lot of people that are willing to put forth that effort to help alleviate the burden from us, or from, to come up with these ideas, or to research, or to. Right.
I would like.
Be willing relook at a budget and see if we can pull some fund money into some things to cut some things here and there. I think there are some things that it would be nice to have, but aren't necessarily top priority to have. Wayfinding would be one of them. You know, it's a nice to have, but it's not certainly not mandatory. It would be nice to have more money in dark skies. It's certainly not mandatory. I would like to see it as an hourly position. Two reasons. One, because I don't have a clear idea yet what it's going to look like. And second of all, because I know that it's hard to find people to step up for these positions. I mean, we've had positions open with the town for 3 years now that we still, and they're simple positions, not a complicated position that we still can't seem to up and do. So, you know, I would say if we can try to develop it out this year and try to find some way other than tax increase to pay for it, that would make me happier than going for a tax increase and then working on it as we go.
One thing that I worry about with doing hourly is, or just a lower paid position, is that alone might make it harder to find someone for that position. However, like having a committee of people that are willing to do it, that, you know, you could have multiple minds on it. I mean, that, you know, if we had volunteers that are willing to do that, I mean, that could definitely be a temporary solution, while we flesh it out more. But I would just worry that with a lower paid position, that would make it much less enticing, and that position might just sit around for a while.
Yeah, if we do an hourly, we want to make it as good.
Yeah, it would have to be a decent hourly wage. Can I propose like a 5
Do we
minute
have
round?
somebody in mind to fulfill it? I mean, I don't think we're offering bad wages for a bookkeeper or a note taker either, but there's just no applicants to apply for it. So do we have, you know, I mean, it's, that's a tough thing to do.
Yeah. Agreed.
You just want to hit it or?
Oh, yeah.
Are we good on a bio? Does anybody need a bio break? Spencer's asking.
I don't ask. I think
I think it's helpful. Well, he's just going. What do you have to say to all that, Josh? What's your opinion on all that?
I mean, it feels like we had a good discussion. I really appreciate people's feedback. I think it's like a little bit of time to just like, you know, we need to say where people are at, what they are thinking about the tax increase. I would go at it this way. I would say, one, are we doing a tax increase or not? If not, then what changes do we want to make to the budget? Because we have to make changes to the budget because it currently calls for $50,000 of revenue in there. And, you know, we could start throwing out things like Jen was talking about in terms of, you know, reducing dark skies or trails or business community promotion, you know, those sort of things. And, you know, come up with what the budget is that, you know, we would vote on next week. So I would say like, let's just finish a quick straw poll. Like, are people a yes or a no on the tax increase? And if we don't have 3 yeses, then, you know, then let's move to the next discussion of how we're gonna direct Aaron to amend the budget so we can have something to vote on next week.
I mean, I suppose that I'm a no with the caveat that I don't want to drop the conversation. Like I'm not against property tax raising, but I'm against, not again, I can't vote for this either. That's where I'm at.
I'm in the same boat, Britt.
That's 3 no's.
So y'all can keep y'all's secrets. Keep your secrets.
Sorry.
I think I'm for it.
So I didn't hear. Did Gary say something?
Yeah, Gary said no.
Okay. So anyway, so this kind of 3-2 against. So that, you know, sets our, you know, our path forward. We need to either cut $50,000 out of the proposed budget or agree to spend some of the fund balance, you know, a pretty good chunk of the fund balance on things that I would consider, you know, that we consider more one time and not critical. And so I think that's the discussion we need to have so that Aaron can, work on getting us an amended budget. Sorry, I went off camera for a minute and forgot to turn it back on. So what do people think about, I guess the question I would break down is either starting to cut some of those nice to haves that we listed, and or a combination of cutting and using some of the fund balance. I'm nervous about using too much of the fund balance because I'd like to have an emergency cushion, and we really don't have one now the way all of our savings are put into capital projects. So I don't know that I would want to spend a bunch of that rollover reserve funds, but I think it would be okay to spend some of it. What are folks' thoughts on cutting some of those nice to have items and or using some fund balance?
My preference is cut and save the fund balance.
I'm leaning more towards that too, just with hearing I mean, even just Jen's statement of being 40% down in Jan, and I think let's just play it conservative. That would be my thought.
I'd agree.
How about you, Jen? She's out in the wind.
Yes, she is.
Can you hear us, Jen?
Yeah, I can. Can you hear me? I'm windy. I'm trying to find a block. I am for kind of a combination of both. I think that, I think that we could definitely cut a few things, but I think that we could work around some things and make something work.
Just to clarify, Jen, it was kind of windy. Did you say, were you kind of mirroring what we said, or?
She moved.
Women.
You're on mute again.
I think she's trying to get out of the wind.
I'm trying to mute also. I'm for a combination of both. I think that we could cut some things and we could use some fund balance money. I think we could make something work.
Okay.
So, yeah, I mean, the thing is we need to give enough direction to Aaron as to what that thing is to make work. So maybe what I'll do is throw out a few proposals and get people's feedback. If we were to, we've got a $50,000 basically gap in the budget if we don't pass the tax increase. If we filled that like $30,000 of cuts and $20,000 of fund balance, that would still leave how much in fund balance? If our estimates are right, Aaron?
What was that number again? How much did you want to?
If we
20.
cut 30 and use 20 in fund balance, how much would the fund balance remaining be?
Still about 120,000.
Well, but that includes the capital project.
Next year, for the end of next year. Hang tight 1 second. So we're saying our new fund balance would be amounts appropriated. Ugh, I don't want to do this. Okay. 146.23. Sorry, I just gotta highlight along the way so I don't lose what changes one weekend. And then you would move this to 33.6. Okay, and then if you kept that position in there, is that what you're saying? Keep that position in there?
She was.
Yeah.
That's all. That would provide a resulting if this math is correct, $45,000 fund balance into fiscal year 2028.
So that's like versus a 65 if we did all with cuts. So if we did that, I'm just continuing with the straw proposal of $30,000 of cuts and $20,000 of fund balance, then where do we take the $30,000 of cuts? And it seems like to me, we would maybe axe or cut the dark skies money by 10,000. So only have 5,000 in dark skies money. Cut the community promotion maybe from 15,000 down to, or the Bob promotion down 15,000 down to 5,000. That's 20,000. And then get rid of the wayfinding project, and that would be 30,000.
I pause real quick, Josh.
Hold up. So if you want it, sorry. So the $45,000 that was quoted, that would be if you didn't make any cuts. If you made those cuts, that would be $65,000 in fund balance to the next year. So if you do 20,000, you got 65,000. Sorry.
If you make $30,000 in cuts, you'll have $65,000 in fund balance.
Sorry, I think I misheard you. $30,000 in cuts
20.
is going to be $75,000 in fund balance. There.
So yeah, so in terms of that straw proposal, how do folks think about that? We cut 30,000 by the items I mentioned, and we use 20,000 of fund balance, and we would still have a somewhat healthy fund balance to start building up an emergency fund if things go well.
Can I see how much is in the secondary water bucket?
So technically, that's all coming out of capital projects right now.
All right.
We don't have anything allocated.
Outside of capital project.
Yeah, so Britt, that's like, it's hard, is like, yeah, it's a big number, but it's committed to capital projects, so we really wouldn't want to use that to fund ongoing things. So like, we might not use all that money and it would stay in capital projects, but it's not particularly helpful with our current situation.
What if we kept the level of Bob funding the same level that we have it right now, which is 10,000, and had took a little bit more out of the fund balance? So cut 5,000 from the Bob funding, cut the sign program, cut the extra money to dark skies. Would that work for anybody?
I mean, I'm okay with that, Jen. I think, our hope obviously is that our conservative budgeting, also will be able to increase the fund balance by the end of the year. And we could obviously keep an eye on it. We don't have to spend everything, in the beginning of the year either. We would want to start spending some of this position money right away to start, addressing issues, but we don't have to spend all of a lot of things right away, and we can keep an eye on things.
I'd also kind of like to still get a more clear picture, and that's why I say maybe hourly at first with this position, because maybe it's not even going to take the whole $40,000 because we haven't developed it, and I think that needs to happen.
Yeah, I mean, for sure, the next step would be that we bring to the council, have Chief Diego come in, bring to the council a more worked out job description, have folks, give feedback, and, we do all that before we could fly the position anyway. You can't hire for a position that you don't have it all fleshed out on. My sense is that the lower you make the number, the harder it is to recruit somebody, right? Like the harder it is for them to like fit it in and make a living. But you're right, we might not find anybody, and therefore we don't spend the money. There is no person in mind. That would be crazy unethical. And for the people that have been saying that and spreading those rumors, shame on you. I'll say that publicly and out loud. That is just ridiculous. And that's not how we run this town. But we have to see if we can find someone. If we don't find someone, then we don't spend that money. But I think that we should budget a reasonable amount that we could actually maybe attract someone to, have kind of a part-time position that they might actually be able to, make it work with another part-time position in town or something.
What were the three buckets? We were cutting dark sky,
Bob, wayfinding.
wayfind, okay.
And then, so I've got Jen's proposal of the 10,000, so estimated expenditures of 10, or budget of 10,000 for Bob. Are you saying completely cut that 10,000 for community promotion and the 15 for dark skies? Or would you leave any in those buckets?
I think she said cut dark skies by 10, so leave 5.
And then I think she said cut
I
Bob
would-
by 5.
I would just basically go back to the same funding that we have them at this year because we increased both dark sky and the business owners of Bluff funding.
Yeah, so this year we did 10,000 to Bob. So leave it 10,000 for Bob. We had 5,000 for dark skies. We were proposing to make it 15, so we'd be cutting dark skies by 10. I think we would cut the trails. Well, I would like to keep the trails because we might need matching funds, but we could come back to that. And then the wayfinding project we would eliminate for now and maybe see if we can write a grant or something.
Okay. All right, so your targeted fund balance going into fiscal year 2028 is going to be 65,000 or more. Is that what we're aiming for?
Right.
I think that still seems like a good chunk.
Okay,
I guess.
all right,
Yeah,
so
I think
that's, I just gotta work with all the calculations here and get that direction. That does bring up, or as we're looking through, well, okay, sorry, let me stop. Any other proposed changes in there? In those areas?
The only other thing was just like, do we want to have something in there for the cemetery? Beyond the, I think $400 we add in there. Should we bump that to like 1,500 or something?
Have they plotted out like plots?
No, they need to.
They gotta do that on
Yeah.
the new stretch, on the new section. I mean, I would give maybe a little bit more if they're gonna have to do. So are they gonna have to do surveying
They're
plot
gonna
for
need-
that?
yeah, they are wanting some survey plots done.
Do they have they got a quote or have like any estimates or anything?
No, not yet.
I wonder what that costs.
Always give it.
I guess we could always pull more
We can
money
always
from,
bump it.
we could pull a couple grand from the,
They need it,
yeah.
like they've done in the past, so.
I would say let's with the cemetery do stuff that they need to do, but when it comes to beautification and things like that, there again, that's another nice to have, not necessary to have. We've functioned with the cemetery that we have for a long time now. If we have more money or, or if the community really wants to push it or something like that, then maybe they look at different ways to fund stuff like that.
It seems like even before the road idea, you would wanna plot out what your cemetery is gonna look like, so it seems like that would be expense right off the bat.
I do wanna make sure, hoping I did not miss any of that from them. Yeah, I don't think they had included that in any of the stuff. Michael, I'm getting to you. I'm so sorry. Can I ask you for 2 seconds? So while Michael's still here, I'm so sorry, Michael. Come back to cemetery.
We should have started with my.
I know, I'm so sorry. He's getting paid though, so it's good.
Give you money.
Michael, can you have some print offs? I just wanted to make sure that, and I'll scan this to the other council members. But after our discussion where it is appearing to look positive for him as well in terms of money available. He has a proposal of how he would like to, and we're focusing high level. So he's got, a couple roads on here and everything, but I think just from a high level perspective of improvements, maintenance, equipment, things like that. And Jen and Josh, I'll send this to you right after. But the total dollar amount would be 252.
252 is the preliminary C roads budget.
Yeah.
Uh, And when we go through that, the maintenance portion is 72,000. Big portion of that is the Bluff Bench Road, where that's where Nielsen Construction used that road to feed that project on 162. And really caused a lot of damage to the edges and potholes. Running those gravel holes through there. They did stop once I met with the guy running the job. They did stop running the trucks over that road. But so, and then the rest of the maintenance is culvert clearing and road grading. The next item is improvements and south of Sagebrush and West Bluff, that gravel portion over there. We would improve that. I'm not sure we're gonna use the crushed asphalt because I have any issues with it right now.
Right.
And then next to our chip sealing at Second Street East, I combined that to 109. I would go to the San Juan County Transportation Board and ask for another matching grant for that portion. We already got one for 83,000, so. And then the roads manager salary, engineering services, equipment purchase. We talked about a box grader, a mower. The pickup truck would be something the town would do, not the roads department. And mechanical sweeper.
Yeah, so that would be, to recap for the folks online, $72,000 in maintenance, $133,000 in improvements. And then $47,000 in salary, engineering services, and equipment purchases. So $252,000. And again, he's good for the
Well, if we go through the fiscal year and if we do spend 252,000. The account, Ciro's account would still have about 110 in reserves.
Right. Awesome. Yeah,
those matching funds from San Juan County make a huge difference.
Yeah.
Thanks for securing those, Michael.
Yeah.
I would love to hear about the crushed asphalt.
Yeah, I've been working with the contractor and the engineer to figure out some.
Yeah.
I think the dryness, personally, I think they've used it in other parts of the county and they haven't had issues.
But we've had almost no moisture since they've been
Yeah.
put in.
But still, at the end of the day, you wanna have a decent road surface.
Yeah. I'd also be interested in, and maybe you already told us this and I forgot, but how much more money we get from it being, because they consider it paved if we do the crushed asphalt.
Right. Well, that was the incentive.
Right. Right.
The plans of mice have been straight. But,
In theory, the heat was supposed to do something and.
yeah,
like
well,
turn it
yeah, that was
in
the other
asphalt.
thing that.
No,
The
that's-
engineer told us, it still may do that.
Yeah.
Well, that was the hope,
Well, we got
But-
heat.
but, I'll figure, you know, we'll solve the problem.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
So any other comments? You know, this is preliminary. Next week you're gonna get the final and I've been working. But that's the ballpark, you know.
And again,
Fifth Street, you know, Fifth Street would like to, you know, over there by the post office, by the pump, like to repave it, fix the drainage.
Oh, yeah.
That's a very active street.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the drainage is bad there.
Thanks, Michael.
Yeah,
Looks good.
so, yeah.
Interesting conversation you all had. Personally, I support a tax increase.
All right, yeah, thank you, Michael, and obviously those funds are like restricted to roads. We need to spend them on roads, and so we may as well be doing good stuff with them, and I think we'll be putting them to good use in the next year. So thank you, Michael.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, I think we have our marching orders for putting it together, the budget to vote on for next week. Maybe I'll leave it, Aaron, if you have any further questions for individual council members, you could talk to them afterwards. We've had a long discussion already. We have one more item we really need to get to due to our legal responsibilities. And so are folks okay if we move on past this item to the next one?
Yep. Thank y'all.
So, you know, in the realm of ongoing responsibilities that the legislature is asking towns to take on, there's legislation that was in your packet that has recently passed that has increased the kind of reporting requirements for towns on emergency services. And one of them is that we need to dictate, or we need to report to the state who are the 4 people and the line of succession of who our emergency managers for the town would be. And in the past, we've essentially had Aaron as the emergency manager and not really a succession after that. Legally, the mayor has a lot of emergency powers. This new bill said that you need to, by July 1st, say who your 4 people are in their order of succession, or if you don't do that, then it defaults to the default in the bill, which basically 3 out of the 4 people are the mayor. So that means there's not really a succession at that point. And so our thinking is that we've got a lot of work to do on our emergency planning for town. We also have to submit an emergency management plan, and we have to submit an emergency alert plan, all of which we don't really have totally together at this point. We will have to do our best with the resources that we have. But what we really need to decide on is the succession of these 4 people. And what Aaron and I have discussed in kind of a proposal for you is I'm willing to take on like the number 1 emergency management role. The mayor is kind of the default of that anyhow. In the past, Mayor Lepinen didn't feel as comfortable in that position and had asked Aaron to do that. But Aaron would be more comfortable if I took that as the number 1 person. And then Aaron would be number 2 in succession. And then really we need to figure out who number 3 and 4 would be. All 4 of these people need to become really familiar with our emergency management plan and take some training, particularly some incident command training. But we could have Malia be a number 3 or a number 4. I don't know if Aaron, you actually got a chance to talk to Malia about that at all.
I didn't.
That
She
could
would be. What do you think, Malia?
Cause you have the training.
You do.
so that could be one of the 4. I did talk to Chief DeLego, and she would be willing to be one of the 4, but there's some obvious problems with that, because if there really was an emergency, particularly a fire emergency, she would be pretty taken up in the response side of things. We do have a council member on our council that has extensive public safety service. Maybe said person would be considered being a person. And then we could also look to Mayor Pro Tem sort of role. So that's the discussion we need to have. We don't have to keep this forever. We can change it, but it would be good for us to submit at least our current, for an order of succession now, so that it just doesn't default to 1, 2, and 3 being the mayor and 4 being, I can't remember the other position, but
So the
Does it
fourth
have
one,
to be a council member?
No,
nothing saying.
I
it
would
needs-
propose that we ask Lou Hook about this because she's very up on emergency procedures anyways and gets a lot of direct calls to the lodge from their past participation. I don't know, just throw that out there.
Yeah, I mean, I might suggest there is a value in it being, someone formally with the town, having some authority. I mean, you're designating a person if you don't. But maybe we could designate 4 for now and then have that conversation with Luann and see if it was appropriate to replace one of the 4 that we designate.
the fourth one, does it have to be law enforcement?
no,
'Cause the
No,
way
it,
the
no, it doesn't. I was just saying, you have a lot of experience in that. But it
Yeah.
doesn't have to be, but it defaults to, the law enforcement officer. And since we don't have one of those, it doesn't particularly help us if it defaults.
it would go to the county then?
no.
The sheriff? Or
They-
just
this-
If we had.
If we had a, yeah, if we
Yeah.
had a gotcha. Well, I mean, I can definitely do it, but I've always said if I am involved with your emergency, then 2 bad things have happened today. So you prefer someone else to take it, but I can definitely do it. I don't have any of those trainings. So I have a woofer. So
Of law enforcement, but not emergency. Keep me out of that.
I could look into it too.
That's how you really feel. Tell me
No,
the
I-
answer.
No, I could do it.
But, yeah, and I mean, if we reach outside the council,
Yeah,
someone
there
that
might,
has a lot of it is, Gary. Lipton,
yeah,
cause he's been in the command posts
Well,
on these fires and all this stuff.
well, if y'all want, you can put me down for now and I can do whatever training. And then we could change that. Because they're definitely better people than me. And we can have the conversation of changing it, but I can be on the list. Where do you want me in the list?
by the time we submit this, does everyone need to be all trained up and ready to go?
No, it's not that. It's just like, I think we responsibility wise need to move in that direction. We need to work on our emergency management plan. We need the 4 people to know that plan inside and out. We need them to have some very basic incident command training. So basically it's a basic commitment. I think, for me and Aaron, the kind of first 2, we'll do more than that. And I have a lot of training in this. But I feel like, the number 3 and 4, kind of the basics of really knowing the plan, and having a basic knowledge of the incident command system is basically what we need. I think there are no, proven requirements by the state.
I am receiving indication from our administrative director that she would be comfortable as the 3rd. Unless anyone is very much vying for that 3rd position.
No, I can be 4th.
Okay. And then Mayor Pro Tem Britt.
Then the secondary question, which I think is a pretty basic one, but we need to dictate who in the town is authorized to send out emergency alerts. We don't really have a system for sending out emergency alerts yet. We need to work on that, but we have to submit the list of people that are authorized to send emergency alerts. And I would suggest that we just make it the 4 people that we just designated that those are the 4 people that are authorized to send out emergency alerts. And maybe add the fire chief on top of that.
Good to me.
Oh, Jen, are you trying to talk? You should.
I was just
unmute.
agreeing that that would be okay.
Cool.
All right, well, if folks are good with that, it's not like we need a formal resolution, but we do need to make that submission to the state before July 1st. So we will work on getting that submitted. Cool. Thanks everybody for the time. We do, I wonder if, I know it's been a long council meeting. Maybe we would just ask people to review the financials in the packet and maybe save questions for our next meeting unless people have urgent questions on the financials now.
All good.
I think we went over some of it too, just, revenues are looking better, less than expenses, but yeah, if you have any individual questions, especially ones that you think might impact the budget next year, let me know.
All right. Well, I really appreciate everybody's thoughtful feedback and discussion tonight. Look forward to seeing you back in person for our meeting next Tuesday. And if there are no other items, we can consider ourselves adjourned.
Thanks, man.
Do it.
All right.
Safe.
It's 5:50 there, right?
Yes, sir. All right, we're turning off the recorder.
Thanks, everybody.
Safe travel.
Yeah.
Thanks, see you.
You.